The rain had been falling for hours, not in sheets, but in a quiet, ceaseless way that soaked everything it touched. Along the edge of a narrow village road, where the land dipped into a shallow ditch, water pooled around broken branches and discarded plastic. A man walked slowly, his boots sinking into the softened earth with each step. He wasn't supposed to be here, not on this side of the bend, not in this weather. But the road ahead was blocked by a fallen tree, and the detour led him past the fence. He nearly passed her. She wasn't moving. Curled against the base of a collapsed wooden post, the dog looked like part of the debris. Soaked fur pressed flat against her ribs, legs folded awkwardly beneath her. One ear had flopped across her eye. The other twitched once, then stilled. She didn't lift her head. She didn't run. That alone told him something was wrong. He stopped, breath catching slightly in his throat. The water ran past her haunches, shallow but steady. Her coat, once white or pale brown, was matted with mud and bramble. From a distance, she looked more like a shadow than a living thing. The man took a slow step forward, then another. His hands stayed low, loose at his sides. There was no leash, no collar, no other footprints in the mud, only his and hers, faint, scattered, and ending right where she lay. Her eyes were open, but barely. Lashes stuck together with grit. She blinked once, slowly, and then didn't again. Her ribs moved under the skin, shallow and uneven. The occasional twitch in her flank hinted at discomfort, or cold, or both. He knelt nearby, letting the silence fill the space between them. The road behind him was quiet, only the hush of rain in the trees and the soft trickle of water along the ditch. His jacket darkened further at the shoulders. He didn't speak yet. Sometimes it was better not to. She lifted her head half an inch, enough to acknowledge his shape, then let it fall back to the ground. Now, closer, he could see the thorns tangled in the fur near her back legs. Her paws were scraped, pads worn raw. Whatever road she had walked, it had not been easy. Her body bore the signs of distance, hunger, and exposure, not just from the past day, but many before it. "Hey, girl," he said softly, the words barely rising above the rain. "You don't have to move." Her ears flicked. Not much, but enough. He pulled a folded cloth from his pack and laid it beside her, not trying to touch her yet. Her nose twitched slightly, catching the scent. Still, she didn't move. It wasn't fear. It was something else, the kind of stillness that came only when energy had been spent completely. Minutes passed like that. Quiet, unmoving, the world slowing around the small ditch. A crow passed overhead, then vanished into the fog. The man shifted his weight carefully and placed a hand near her paw. Close, but not touching. She did not flinch. That, too, told him something. Beneath the rain and mud and thorns, she had not given up. Not entirely. He stayed with her as the light began to thin. The trees dripped in slow rhythm and the ditch water curved around them like a gentle stream. In this forgotten corner of the road, with no one else in sight, a quiet moment formed. A choice made. A life not yet left behind. She closed her eyes, not fully, just enough to say, "I see you." And still, she did not move. He moved slowly, the way someone does when approaching something that might vanish if they're too loud. A few steps more, and he was close enough to see the curve of her ribs beneath the patchy fur, the dampness darkening her sides in uneven streaks. She wasn't dead. Not yet. He watched for movement, unsure at first, then caught the shallow rise of her chest. There again, then a pause, then again. Breathing, but barely. The rain still touched everything, but not with force. It had thinned to a mist, settling gently on branches, weaving through grass. The ground beneath her was soft with runoff. Mud clung to the back of her hind legs. Her front paw was twisted slightly under her chest, and her nails, long and cracked, told of time without trimming or shelter. A few thorns were lodged near the inner bend of her rear leg, tangled in fur. Dried blood marked a trail along her flank, but not enough to explain her collapse. She had walked a long road to reach this place, and now she had laid herself down. The man didn't speak yet. His breath showed in small bursts, and he let it slow before he lowered himself beside her. She didn't move away. Her eyes were barely open, slits between lashes heavy with mud and rain, but there was a flicker of recognition when his shadow shifted. A response, however small. Her ears didn't perk, but they turned slightly in his presence. He reached toward the cloth in his bag. Nothing loud, just the rustle of dry fabric unfurling against the wet. He placed it a few inches from her shoulder, a soft patch against the earth. She didn't inch toward it. She didn't move at all. Her stillness wasn't resisted. It was surrender, not of spirit, but of body. The kind of stillness that comes when nothing is left, when energy becomes memory and nothing more. A faint tremble passed through her side. It came like a ripple starting near her haunch and stopping at her ribs. It wasn't dramatic, it was barely even visible, but it was there. Cold, exhaustion, something else. He leaned closer now, just enough to listen. Not for words, but for breath. The rhythm of life was slow inside her, slower than it should have been. But it was there. He whispered, "It's okay, girl." The words thin against the damp air. She blinked once in return. That was all. The man lowered his bag gently, then crouched beside her with both knees in the mud. He didn't reach for her yet. His hands hovered over the space between them, warm and steady, but never intrusive. She remained limp. Her body seemed untouched by anything outside of its own slow rhythm, except her nose. It moved slightly, twitched, barely noticeable but present. She was smelling him, or the cloth, or the warmth he carried. He pulled a water bottle from his coat, uncapped it, and poured a few drops into the cupped palm of his hand. He brought it low, just under her mouth. At first, she didn't respond, then a soft flick of her tongue, quick, like instinct, then again. Only a few sips, but it was something, a thread of will. There was no collar, no tag. Her fur bore the mess of streets and bush, not backyards. Astray, but not wild. Somewhere, someone had let her go or never stopped her from leaving. But now, she was here. On a back road too quiet for traffic, in a ditch too shallow to offer safety, waiting. He scanned her body for injuries. No visible open wounds, but her hip was swollen slightly, bruised beneath the fur. A deeper injury, maybe from a fall or a blow. Her paws were raw, pads cracked from long walking. One nail on her front foot was bleeding slightly, torn low at the quick, yet there were no signs of a struggle. No defensive wounds, just distance, just time, just survival on foot until there was no foot left to give. He reached out and placed his palm lightly on her side. She didn't flinch. Her ribs rose and fell beneath it. Still shallow, still slow, but rhythm is a beginning. The wind passed low through the grass around them, bending the stalks in soft arcs. A bird called somewhere distant, high, a single note, and then silence returned. The road behind them remained empty. He moved with intention now, pulling his thicker coat from the pack and laying it out beside her. He didn't lift her. Not yet. Instead, he placed the coat close, folding it once, then again, making a dry pocket in the wetness. Then he slid his arms beneath her, not to carry, just to shift, and moved her gently onto the coat. She groaned, a low sound. Her body stiffened for a second, then released. Her head fell into the crook of the fold. She breathed out, long and slow. Her tail moved. Not much, just one soft brush against the edge of the cloth, but it moved. A flicker of life returning. The man knelt beside her for a long time, not touching, just watching. The sky above remained a pale gray, but brighter at the edge. A break in the cloud line hinted at light. Her body, now curled loosely on the coat, no longer trembled, not visibly. Her chest lifted more evenly, not strong, not yet, but enough. She licked her lips, then opened her eyes, this time fully. Brown eyes, clouded slightly at the edge but clear in the center. She looked at him, not with gratitude, not with fear, with awareness. She knew he was there. That night he didn't leave. He moved her in the coat under a low rise of overgrown shrub that leaned like a sheltering roof. He built no fire. He didn't eat. He simply stayed. The air cooled further, and dew gathered in the grass. She slept. Her body twitched occasionally, paws paddling once, twice before stilling. Dreaming, maybe. Or remembering. In the early hours before dawn, she sat up. Slowly, with care, her front legs pressed into the earth, her body trembling from effort. She rose to her chest, then folded again. But the man saw it. She tried. He moved closer, pressing the fleece beneath her again, offering a softer bed. She lowered herself without resistance. She let out a small sound, barely audible, a low breath through her nose, as she settled. He placed his hand beside her paw. Not touching, just near. And for the first time since he found her, she moved toward him. Her paw stretched across the fleece, just far enough to touch his fingers. That was all. But it was enough. The path ahead was no longer a path. What had once been a narrow trail, likely used by livestock or old villagers walking between fields, was now a cut of muddy earth folded with broken twigs and the soft rise of water in places it didn't belong. Rain had shifted the land, not in torrents, but in quiet persistence. Each drop had soaked deep until the ground could take no more. The forest around them felt swollen with silence, the way trees hold breath before something shifts. He moved slowly, the dog held against his chest like something borrowed from a quieter world. Her fur was damp and cold against his jacket, but she didn't resist the hold. She hadn't resisted anything since the moment he lifted her. Her body, while thin and tired, had stopped trembling now. Her breath came in slow, shallow rhythms, and her ears flicked only occasionally in response to the world outside. She didn't whine. She didn't protest. She simply let herself be carried, as if she knew this wasn't a choice she could make on her own. The man adjusted his arms, feeling the weight of her shift slightly as he stepped around a deep puddle. The river, though still out of sight, was near. He could hear it, not rushing, but speaking. The tone of a river tells you what it's doing. A fast river shouts. A slow river hums. This one whispered now, just loud enough to be taken seriously. It had grown over the past day, pulling at the edges of its banks, rising into the brush, reshaping trails that used to lead cleanly across. He'd hoped to find the footbridge still intact. It wasn't. A fallen tree, perhaps from last season's storm, had cracked its spine and sent the planks tumbling into the current. What remained was a decision. He didn't rush toward it. That kind of decision can't be made in movement. Instead, he stood on the high bank above the river's edge, watching. The dog's eyes stayed closed now, her face tucked close to the hollow of his shoulder. The sound of the river perhaps too familiar, too far removed from wherever her mind rested. He shifted her slightly, bracing one arm under her hind legs. The other curled beneath her shoulders. She was lighter than she looked, bones sharp beneath matted fur, her belly hanging with a weight that no longer felt like starvation. Below, the river churned gently. It wasn't wide, maybe 10 feet across at its narrowest bend, but its current moved with purpose, wrapping around the mossy rocks with the kind of quiet strength that makes you listen twice. There were stones visible beneath the surface, flat and worn. He could step them, maybe. He could try, but with her in his arms there would be no second chance. No free hand. No way to catch himself if the earth shifted beneath him. Still, he didn't hesitate long. Sometimes the body answers before the mind. He began to step down the slope. Boots sinking slightly in the wet soil, his breath steady but full. She didn't move. Her legs hung quietly, tail limp, chin resting now fully along his forearm. The wind shifted once, lifting the edge of his hood. He didn't adjust it. At the water's edge, he paused only once more, eyes scanning the current, then the line of stones disappearing into it. He leaned slightly, gauging depth. It would reach his knees at most, perhaps higher if the bed dropped unexpectedly. The first stone was stable. He placed one foot on it and let his weight settle before lifting the other. The water touched his boot, then wrapped around his ankle with a cold that bit quietly. Not sharp, but real. The current pressed like hands, not enough to steal balance, but enough to remind him that it was there. He stepped again. Each move was deliberate. His arms tightened slightly with the effort of balance and weight. The dog did not stir. Her body remained curled, breath slow, one paw twitching faintly now and then, either in pain or memory. He didn't look down. His eyes were fixed on the far bank, then the next stone, then the next. Midway, the current deepened. Water surged just beneath his knees, dragging at the edge of his coat. One stone shifted as he stepped, slipping beneath his foot. His boot slid. Not far, just enough to send a shock up his spine. He caught himself with a sharp inhale, knees tightening, weight shifting forward. For a moment, everything stilled. The world became the sound of water and heartbeat. Then he found the next stone. The last steps came slowly, not from fear, but from respect. The forest does not favor the hurried. As the water began to shallow again, he felt the slope of land returning beneath his boots. The far bank rose in a gentle curve, the earth firmer, the roots stronger. He stepped from the water, the weight of her still against him, and exhaled quietly. He didn't speak. There was no need. He found a patch of grass just beyond the trees where the land dipped slightly and settled down. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the mist clung low, curling through the branches like thought. He laid her gently onto a piece of fleece he'd been carrying, folding it beneath her belly. She shifted then, only slightly, her eyes opening, not wide, just enough. She looked at him, or near him, and then closed them again. He crouched beside her, watching the rise of her ribs. He touched her gently on the shoulder, not to move her, not to check, just to let her know he was still there. And then, from somewhere just beneath the hollow of her belly, he felt it. The smallest twitch. Not hers. It came again, softer this time, like the flutter of a breath inside a breath. He froze. She made no sound, but her body shifted, curling slightly. One paw moved to rest closer to her underside. And there it was again. Undeniable. A life inside of her speaking without sound. He didn't pull away. The realization settled like weightless stone. She hadn't been walking for herself alone. Whatever had pushed her to the edge of exhaustion, whatever had kept her from collapsing long before, it hadn't been just hunger or cold. She had been carrying more than fatigue. She had been carrying futures. He stayed beside her as night fell. The sky above grew dim and wide. Owls called from higher branches, and the river behind them slipped back into rhythm. She slept, or something close to it, her body curled loosely now, no longer taut with fear. When he finally leaned back, arms resting on his knees, he looked not at her, but at the space around her, the space she had filled without asking, the space she had claimed simply by surviving. He said nothing, not even to himself. In the darkness, the wind moved through the trees like an old song. The dog breathed evenly, her belly rising and falling with a pattern not quite her own. And there, on the other side of the river, the world kept turning. Slowly, but forever changed. Under a patch of pine and alder where the river thinned into marshy stillness, the man settled her down again. His hands, reddened from cold and strain, moved with care as he laid out the last of the blankets from his pack. It wasn't much, a dry place, a scrap of warmth, but it was better than stone and rain. She rested her head against the cloth and let her breath fall into a slower rhythm, eyes half closed, no longer tracking his every motion. Her trust, though faint, had begun to form. The light around them dimmed into the kind of dusk that forgets the sun. The woods behind the slope whispered with wind, not loud, but present. She didn't stir from the place he had made for her. Not when a branch snapped in the distance, not when a nightbird called once and flew on. Her body remained low, curled in on itself, her ribs rising and falling like slow tides. He sat nearby, close but not touching. The nearness was enough. Sometimes proximity without pressure does more than the finest treatment. Her breathing stayed shallow but no longer struggled. Beneath her fur, something had softened, the way an overstrung wire finally loosens. The tension in her back legs had eased. Her paws, tucked neatly beneath her chest, no longer curled inward from the cold. She was healing by inches, not days, and inch by inch, life returned. Then, as night thickened and the first stars began to tremble in the canopy above, he noticed something else. It was subtle, a shift beneath her belly, not the twitch of a dream or the stretch of healing muscle. It was rhythmic, but not her breath. It pulsed in a different tempo. A light movement pressing from within. His eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't speak. He only watched. Again, a flutter. Small, soft, almost imperceptible. He moved closer, his hand hovering just above her ribs. She didn't flinch. There was something in her stillness now that felt sacred, protective. As though her body knew before he did. The man leaned in and laid his palm just above her side against the soft rise of her stomach. And there it was again. A second rhythm, faint but firm. Then another, smaller still. Life inside of life. A hidden constellation waiting in the dark. The dog exhaled long and even. Her eyes opened and met him briefly. Calm, unreadable, but somehow more whole than before. He understood now. She had not simply wandered for shelter. She had been searching for a place not just to rest, but to survive long enough for another day. Not for herself alone. She was carrying life. Not far along, but far enough to matter. The tremble he had seen earlier was not only fatigue, but the body shifting to protect something delicate. He thought again of her stillness by the roadside. Not surrender, but fierce, silent endurance. Around them, the night deepened. In the distance, the river hummed over stones, and wind brushed through the brittle grass. He wrapped another cloth around her side, tucking it close, not touching the belly. Her ears lifted slightly, but she didn't move. The air cooled further, and he built a quiet shelter of sorts. Branches leaned together, plastic tarp draped above like a thin roof. It was not perfect, but it was enough. Enough for her, and enough perhaps for what she carried. The hours passed gently. The wind slowed. She shifted only once, turning slightly in the nest of cloth and fleece, her body adjusting with the careful grace of instinct. A faint noise left her throat. Not pain, not fear. Just a low, private sound. Barely a breath. He stayed with her. Not watching, constantly, but nearby, his presence a steady shape in the dark. It was well after midnight when the first full movement occurred. A stronger flutter, then stillness again. He looked over, eyes adjusting to the dark, and saw the change in her posture. She was alert now, but not tense. Her breathing changed again, deeper, grounded. A small sound passed her lips once more, quieter than a cry, but edged with effort. She lay fully on her side now, legs extended, eyes half-lidded but open. Her ribs flexed, and this time there was no doubt. Life had turned beneath the surface, not once, but twice. He whispered, almost to himself, "You're not alone." No reply came. None was needed. The dog let her body go soft again. Her tail moved once, brushing the edge of the cloth. And slowly the place around her grew quiet, not from absence of sound, but the presence of something settled. She was safe, and so were the hearts she carried. Beneath the wind-worn branches, the miracle was not loud. It did not arrive in fanfare or lightning. It lived in the hush of small movements and the silence that followed. And there, in that borrowed clearing, under a sky that held no promises, something ancient and gentle turned forward, toward beginning. The first hints of autumn crept in slowly, not in color, but in the way the wind moved differently through the trees. There was a clarity in the air, as though the forest had exhaled after a long breath held through summer. In the clearing, the rhythm of life had settled into something steady and true. The shelter remained, but its purpose had shifted. It was no longer a place of emergency. It was a beginning now, layered in silence, covered by leaves, held together by instinct and time. The pups had opened their eyes. It happened gradually, not all at once. A film lifting, a world appearing. They blinked into the soft light, not startled but curious, their movements hesitant and unfinished. One of them, the smallest, was the first to walk a full step before toppling sideways into a patch of fleece. Another, the largest, had started to chew at the corner of the cloth, testing its shape, its edges. Their mother remained close, always between them and the outside. Her body was still lean, her movements slower, but her presence filled the space like breath. She guided without force, corrected without sound. When one pup wandered too far toward the edge of the tarp, she simply stood and walked to block its path, then lay down again, shifting her weight so that all five could find her once more. The man watched from his place beside the tree. He no longer needed to hover or guard. The urgency had passed, replaced by quiet observation and the occasional task: fetching water, reinforcing the shelter, offering food softened by hand. He had learned the pace of this world. It was not his to control, only to respect. That morning, he brought a small bundle of wild grasses to pad the corners where the fleece had worn thin. As he placed it down, the pups startled briefly, their ears catching sound now, their tiny bodies reacting to movement. The mother didn't growl or shift. She simply lifted her head, eyes following his hand, and then lowered it again. That was enough. The pups returned to their play. He found himself smiling at that moment. Not because of what they were, but because of what they represented. Survival, yes, but something more enduring than that. Continuation. A lineage carried not by names or stories, but by heartbeat and breath. Later that evening, he stepped into the clearing with something new, a thin piece of rope tied in a loose loop. He laid it gently near the entrance to the shelter, not as a restraint, but as a quiet offering. If the time came when they would need to leave together, it would help, but for now, he left it there untouched. As dusk settled again, the light turned a warm amber, cutting through the thinning canopy. Shadows stretched across the clearing. The pups had begun to fall asleep one by one, their small bodies twitching as dreams formed inside them. Dreams of scent and warmth, of movement and milk. The mother curled herself around them with practiced ease, her breath moving in sync with the wind through the branches. The man sat nearby, his back against the tree, knees pulled to his chest. He did not speak. He had not spoken aloud in hours. His presence was enough. The fire crackled softly beside him, low and steady, its warmth shared with the air, not stolen from it. The forest dimmed, and in the hush of that hour, in the stillness between day and night, he felt something close in his chest. A tether, perhaps. Not to the dog, not even to the pups, but to the moment itself, to the truth of what had unfolded here without witness, without expectation. Something had been saved, yes, but something else had been restored. He closed his eyes briefly. The wind shifted again, carrying with it the faint rustle of grass, and just beyond the shelter, 5 tiny breaths rose and fell beneath their mother's body, untouched by anything but love.